to the Over Under Movies podcast, the show where we take a prominent figure or franchise in the world of filmmaking and ask the simple question, are they overrated or are they underrated? My name is DeAngelis. I'm joined as always by my co-host. He is the Neo to my Trinity.
Okay.
Mr. Jason Gong.
Hey, Dylan.
It's because, we can be close, but not too close.
Right. All right.
Once we lock hands, then the whole universe goes to shit, apparently.
That's right.
That's how one does. Anyway, The Matrix is one of my favorite movies of all time. I think it's in my Letterboxd top 4. The Matrix, of course, came out in 1999, which means it is getting a 25-year re-release right now. It is one of the movies you talk about when you talk about all the great movies in the 90s.
Yeah.
So, listen, we could have made this episode easy on ourselves. We could have said, let's talk about The Matrix. Everybody loves The Matrix. Matrix is great. We can talk about all the little, moments in it, all of the elements of the film that have inspired action films in the last 25 years since The Matrix came out. But we're not going to make things easy on ourselves.
No, sir.
Because yesterday we watched a film called Matrix Resurrections, which is the 4th film in the Matrix franchise. Came out in 2021, directly to streaming because it was during the pandemic still, basically. And boy, oh boy. First of all, Jason, I guess we should probably start at a baseline here. Because this is a movie that's pretty divisive amongst people. Would you say you're a big fan of the Matrix franchise, or are you a fan of just the first Matrix movie? Where do you land on the spectrum?
I saw the sequels in theaters when I was a kid, so I definitely liked them enough to get my parents to go take me to see them. But I didn't follow them too much afterwards. I didn't rewatch the franchise over and over or anything. I've seen the first one maybe 2 or 3 times all the way through. Obviously a great movie, but it doesn't make my Letterboxd top 4. So it sounds like you have a closer connection to these films than I do.
I've rewatched the 3 Matrix movies well over a dozen times each. I am someone who I kind of really like the Matrix sequels. I understand their flaws for sure, and I think their flaws are just flaws that you see in any sci-fi universe. I forget which episode it was that I talked about this in, but it's pretty common for sci-fi as a genre to have a first book or a first movie be pretty grounded and have a strong structured story to it.
Yep.
And then the sequels kind of go off the rails as they try to build out the world and whatever political or philosophical concepts they're trying to convey through the story.
Yeah.
And that's The Matrix. The Matrix, it just gets weird in the second 2 movies, and it makes them less good than the first one.
Yeah, I would agree with that. The first one's a very tight movie. It's a hero's journey. There's a chosen one. It's all pretty straightforward, even though it has those big, heady philosophical ideas and cool sci-fi concepts. And then 2 and 3 just lean into building out the world, introducing even more philosophy behind it, and it does get weird. But I remember liking them as a kid.
Yeah, same. Maybe I just like the world a lot. So The Matrix, for anybody somehow, if you haven't seen The Matrix, the core concept of The Matrix is that humanity as a civilization has kind of fallen to machines, and the machines are harvesting humans for energy, basically. And in order to keep our human bodies alive and keep them from going crazy or something like that, they put us in this virtual reality world, basically, that is called The Matrix, and it's basically our real world that we exist right now. So it's kind of this cool idea of, oh my god, what if we're actually living in The Matrix, dude?
Yeah, it's the theory that we live in a simulation.
Yeah.
Yes.
However, for anybody that's looked into deep dives or anything about The Matrix is directed by... First Matrix film is directed by the Wachowski brothers. They are no longer the Wachowski brothers because they are both now transgender women, and The Matrix being a transgender allegory is pretty spot on. There is a specific character in the first movie that was designed to be a man in the real world and a woman in the Matrix or something like that. So identity is really central to the themes of The Matrix. However, The Matrix in recent years has been kind of co-opted by weird manosphere people and conspiracy theorists online to represent whatever the man is,
right?
Or whatever the shady cabal of all the people running things in the world. That's the Matrix that you're trying to escape.
Right. And they've co-opted terms like red pill or blue pill, which is from this movie or from the original movie. Yeah, it is really interesting that a lot of it, like alt-right people, have co-opted The Matrix, which is directed by two transgender women.
Yeah, it's very much a progressive type idea for a film. So Matrix Resurrections is the fourth film in the franchise. It is a really unique take on a soft reboot because it's a film that is almost a satire of soft reboots to an extent. I should say, like, right off the bat here, I don't think this is a very good movie, which is kind of contentious, I guess. I know some people do really like it. You gave it, what, 4 stars when you first watched it, apparently? Jason from 3 years ago really liked this movie.
Yeah, well, I had just finished rewatching Sense8 for like the second or third time, which is one of my favorite TV shows, which is also directed by the Wachowskis.
Super gay.
It is, yeah, but that's a show that is also like really philosophical, has some cool sci-fi concepts, and it's all about how everyone's connected, and, you know, there's nothing more important than being close to other people, and I like that concept. And then this movie just recycles a ton of the actors from Sense8 and gives them small little parts for them to do. So it's basically a cast reunion for them. So I had to give it some bonus stars on my Letterboxd.
Yeah, so the plot of this movie is that Neo, who is played by Keanu Reeves, he died at the end of the third Matrix movie. Yep.
Spoilers, yep.
He basically sacrifices himself. He makes a deal with the machines, basically, so that the machines will leave the humans alone. The humans that have escaped the Matrix, they're in this fortress called Zion that by the end of the third movie is getting completely overrun by machines. The machines make a deal with Neo, like, we'll leave Zion alone, but you need to help us stop this rogue program, Agent Smith, who has completely gone like crazy in the Matrix. Mm-hmm. So if you stop him for us, we'll leave the humans alone. And that's exactly what happens at the end of the third Matrix movie. And it's a nice like send-off for everything. It ties the series up in a nice little bow. But Warner Brothers, and it's clear like this movie's only directed by one of the Wachowskis, because clearly the other one was probably like, fuck this. Mm-hmm. They were like, we're going to make this with or without you. It's literally a line in the movie. Warner Brothers, they just said they're going to make the movie with or without us.
Right, yeah. So in this movie, they do like some meta commentary, and within the world of this movie, within the world of the world, because they're in the Matrix, Neo is now a video game designer, and he made a game called The Matrix that was very successful and spawned 2 sequels, and then they get the order from Warner Brothers, who still owns the Matrix IP in this world, that they have to make a 4th one.
They have to make a sequel. They don't have a choice in the matter. I will say, bit of a gripe. We don't see any game footage. The quote-unquote game footage that we get in the movie is just footage from... It's really just footage from the first Matrix movie more than anything.
Yeah.
Like, at least make them animated or something like that. Make it look like a video game.
Maybe video game graphics in this world are so advanced that they just look like the Matrix movie.
Have you seen that Unreal Engine demo that came out?
Yeah. Didn't it have Keanu Reeves in it?
Was Keanu in it? I know it was Matrix themed, the Unreal Engine demo that I think it's still downloadable on PlayStation.
Yeah, I thought Keanu was in that commercial, yeah.
But like they literally could have just used that footage and put it in Matrix Resurrections.
That would have cost more money, Dylan.
Than just reusing footage from 1999.
They already own the footage.
But anyway, this is basically Neo being put back in a simulation, and he's slowly figuring out again that he's in a simulation, and there are more like humans that are trying to get him to escape. One of those is Morpheus, who is kind of a hybrid of what Morpheus was previously, which was the ship captain, the guy that was the leader of the Nebuchadnezzar, and some like Agent Smith like residual programming as well, because he's an agent at the beginning of the movie. Right. He's played by Yahya Abdul Mateen II. Really good actor. I like him a lot. I believe he played Dr. Manhattan in the HBO Watchmen series.
Yep, he did. But that's also a spoiler.
Yeah, I guess spoilers for the Watchmen series.
Yeah.
He's really good in it. I think, does he play Black Manta also in the Aquaman movies? Is that him?
I'm not sure.
I don't know. Don't fact check that for anybody. Anybody listening to that at home?
You can look that up and cut it if it's wrong.
Clearly, Lawrence Fishburne said no when they asked him to come back for this movie.
No, he has a quote. He said they didn't ask him.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's fucked up.
He said, which one of them directed this?
It was Lana Wachowski.
He said, someone asked, why aren't you in the new Matrix? And he was like, you'll have to ask Lana. I don't know.
That's unfortunate. Yeah, so Morpheus is like basically completely recast here.
Well,
and he's a program.
60 years have passed, so most of the
human characters,
the people existing in the real world, have aged out of existence. So that's story-wise why he is not there. He died.
But I think like his performance is probably my favorite performance in the movie. I think he's like really well done. Some of the other people, Jessica Henwick plays Bugs, who I guess she's functionally what Morpheus was in the first movie. She's the captain of the ship that is reintroducing him to everything. For Agent Smith, they don't have what the hell's that?
Hugo Weaving.
Yeah. Hugo Weaving did not return because Hugo Weaving doesn't do acting anymore, apparently.
Hugo Weaving also said yes to being in this, but he had scheduling conflicts.
That's awful. Anyway, he was replaced by he was replaced by Jonathan Groff of Mindhunter fame or Hamilton fame, depending on
what the hell. Yeah.
What type of movie fan is watching this?
I think that's the dichotomy here on this podcast.
That's the spectrum of people that listen to this podcast is people that know Jonathan Groff from either Mindhunter or Hamilton.
Yeah, I mean, which do you know him from?
I loved him in Mindhunter. I think he's really good in it.
I think he's so good in Hamilton. I haven't seen Mindhunter. So yeah, that's the dichotomy. That's what you get with two hosts on a podcast.
Neither of us think of Frozen as our first go-to.
Oh, I forgot. No, I first saw him in Glee.
Cool.
Yeah.
Anyway, speaking of gay guys, Neil Patrick Harris is also in this. He plays the analyst he's functionally the architect from the sequels.
Yeah.
The architect and the Oracle are two programs. There's the two programs that we see at the very end of the third movie, and they say that programs like that were purged from the system, and the analyst is like a replacement to that. Basically, he's there to keep Neo in check. For some plot specific reason, Neo and Trinity need to be kept alive inside this matrix in order for the matrix to function properly.
Yeah, and they have to be close to each other, but not too close. Otherwise, the matrix doesn't work. Because of reasons.
Sure. Sounds good, bro. Carrie-Anne Moss does come back as Trinity.
Yeah.
Or Tiffany is what her name is in the Matrix. And then she's married to a man named Chad, who is played by Chad Stahelski.
Yeah.
The director of the John Wick movies and Keanu Reeves stunt double from the first Matrix movie. Let me just say that this movie, in a lot of ways, is exactly what a soft reboot is. It's a retelling of the first Matrix movie. Just it's longer, it's more boring, and so because of that, this is not a very good movie. Both of us were very bored on this rewatch, I would say. This is one of the more boring rewatches that we've done recently. Spoilers for an upcoming episode. We recently watched Transformers: Revenge of the Fallen. I was not bored during Transformers: Revenge of the Fallen.
I was a little bored during.
At least like things happen in that movie. That movie is also too long.
This movie is better than Transformers: Revenge of the Fallen.
That's a hot take. I think I both rated these movies like 1 star or like 1.5 stars.
You gave this one 1 star, and I think you gave. No, you might have given Revenge of the Fallen 1 star. Yeah.
But anyway, like this movie, it follows the same beats, right? Neo is trepidatious about escaping the Matrix. Eventually, shit goes down, and it kind of like forces him out. And then there's this in-between period where he's kind of acclimating to being out of the Matrix. And then for plot reasons, he needs to re-enter the Matrix and do some fight scenes. It's the exact same plot as the first movie. For some reason, they decide to go like way super hella convoluted with it. And the real question to ask here about this is it intentional? Is this Lana Wachowski trying to do some sort of meta commentary on, I didn't want to fucking make this movie, so I'm making it confusing and nonsensical on purpose?
No, I don't think that's a really good faith take on it. She said that she had like things that she wanted to say with this movie. She said that a lot of the ideas came to her after her parents died, and she started writing the story during that time. So I do think she put a lot of like personal stuff in this and effort. Lily Wachowski said that she didn't return for the same reason, because their parents just died and she did not want to go back to the Matrix. She wanted to do something new. So that's part of why the sisters split for this project. But no, I do think Lana Wachowski was doing some meta commentary about like legacy sequels and whether or not they're necessary. But I think overall, this is like a movie that she wanted to do.
Yeah, and that definitely it makes it worse if it's not intentional.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people do think, hey, she made this movie just to tank the franchise so that they would never make another one. I've heard that theory too, but I don't buy it.
It's definitely the source of like a not insignificant amount of positive discussions about this film online, I would say as well.
Yeah, I was reading the like top Letterboxd reviews today, and people are like, this is like the cure for every bad IP, studio mandated sequel. This is so good. They're doing something fresh and new. And I can see that argument, but I also think it's kind of boring.
Yeah, like what happens in this movie? End of the movie is Neo needs to go back into the Matrix because he needs to get Trinity out, and they have to do this weird convoluted body swap thing in the machine world with Jessica Henwick's character in order to like
I didn't really understand
body swap her or something like that, and then Trinity can fly now at the end of the movie, and her and Neo are like running the Matrix.
Yeah, I mean, so one of the themes that this movie does introduce to the franchise is that like Neo was never the one. It was like the two of them together that is what made Neo seem like the one in the original franchise. Like it placed more importance on their love for each other, and that being like a representation of humanity. And so I think that's why it was so important for this movie that it was kind of a love story by the end of it.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the themes that we get in those Matrix sequels, is that what Neo is going through right now is not necessarily a unique occurrence, that Chosen One types have kind of been a thing. It's like a cycle. The architect and the machines running the Matrix, like they've just had to deal with this every now and then. And when you have that scene, I think it's in the second one when he meets the architect, where he's in the room with all the monitors, and he's basically seeing like all of the different Neos when they got to that moment of meeting the architect, which is kind of cool. I kind of have like a love-hate relationship between those type of stories, where it's basically not you seeing like a breaking of a cycle, but a continuation of a cycle, and you're just like seeing a slice of that. I guess another spoiler. Sorry, this is a very spoiler-heavy episode.
I mean, yeah, it's the last movie in a franchise. I think it's fine.
Spoilers for the end of Battlestar Galactica.
Oh.
So Battlestar Galactica is a show that they reveal that at the very end, that you're watching you're watching a cycle happen that is repeated in the world, where it's a repeated cycle of humans grow more technologically advanced. They design robots who become human-like, the Cylons, and then the Cylons kind of learn how to reproduce, and then eventually the Cylons just like become humanity, and then they become more advanced and more advanced, more advanced, and then they make their own robots.
The Cylon.
And so it's just a continuous cycle, and that's kind of like what we see in the Matrix, except for this version of Neo is the one.
Right.
He is the one that's unique.
He is the one that breaks the cycle, yeah. Kind of, yeah.
And then, is that very interesting?
Just that he breaks the cycle?
I mean, that's it, right?
I mean, kind of. It's just a Chosen One story where there's been other Chosen Ones, but this one, we see his journey and what makes him special. And then the ideas that this movie posit are that, yeah, it's like because of Trinity that he got to be the one that breaks the cycle. And then together, they're like an even more powerful the one. That's my interpretation of it anyway.
I guess another question we got to ask, and this is a question you ask of like any soft reboot, is how important is it to have watched the first three Matrix movies in order to get this one? And the answer is it's insanely important.
It's like you have to watch all three of the first Matrix movies to understand this one, but also this one is going to tell you what happened in the first three.
It's going to completely recap the first three movies,
but not in any sensical way where you can skip the first three movies. It's great.
It's super, super confusing. Even like somebody like me, who I feel like I have a relatively good grasp on the lore, it's a lot to keep up with. When you see Priyanka Chopra's character show up and she goes, "Oh, I'm the little girl from the train station from the third movie," you're like, okay, sounds good, bro.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. They do bring back like a handful of minor characters from the first three movies, but they didn't ask Lawrence Fishburne back.
You mean Jada Pinkett Smith was apparently free?
Yeah.
She's like, I'm not going to the Oscars anytime soon again, so I'll be in your movie.
Yeah, and her character in this movie just fully there to do a bunch of exposition.
Yeah, completely unnecessary. The entire 30 minutes were in it's called IO, the new Zion. It's completely useless. You don't need it in the movie. This movie's 2.5 hours long. There are very clearly like a solid 40 to 45 minutes you could shave off this thing and nothing would be different.
Yeah. There's exposition from beginning to end of this movie. At no point is the audience caught up enough that we can just be doing the story that we're doing. It's constantly explaining to you what happened between the first 3 Matrix films and now.
Yeah, the movie is way too much. One, explaining to you what's happening now, because there is new stuff that isn't in the other movies. Things like the mirrors that they're going between, or the modals, or whatever it's called, that Keanu creates. And so it's doing the new stuff while also explaining the backstory of all this stuff. And what makes the first Matrix a good story is that it's simple. It's a simple fish out of water story. It is a guy that knows nothing about this other world, and as Neo experiences it, the audience is learning about it. And they kind of can't do that in this one because this Neo character kind of already knows all this stuff. He's just been kind of brainwashed into not knowing it anymore. So they don't one-to-one retell the story again, but it's just not as well done. It is like a much like worse attempt at doing the Matrix again as a film.
Yeah, I mean, there are things to like in this movie for sure, and I guess I'll probably say that it's underrated when we get to that segment. But I do agree overall. It's like the first one, except with way more explanations. It's longer, and I don't think it's like stylized in quite the same way. I feel like the first 3 Matrix movies all have like a really distinct look to them.
Yeah, they're kind of like grungy.
Yeah,
and like the color grading is, I mean, it's kind of dirty.
It's like green. Yeah, and this has like brighter colors, which is kind of cool. It makes it feel newer and fresher, but like it definitely feels a little cut off from those original 3 movies. Although it's been 19 years since 3 to 4. 18 years. It's been a long time.
The movie also does the thing that people give Star Wars a lot of shit for, where they just throw member berries in there at random for no reason at all. Like they'll have Keanu eating a steak because they're like, oh, you remember the steak from the first movie? The steak looked so good. Well, Neil Patrick Harris just has a cat that's named Deja Vu because of the Deja Vu cat in the first movie. It's like, hey, you remember that? You remember that thing?
Yeah.
That was cool, right?
Yeah, it's such an on-the-nose callback.
Or like the one fight scene with the Miravidian. Do you even know who the Miravidian is? Do you remember?
I looked him up afterwards.
Yeah, because it's like nobody fucking remembers the Miravidian. They're like, if we're putting him in the movie, where's Monica Bellucci?
Right.
That's the question. You're not going to get her back?
Yeah, they made interesting choices with like what callbacks they were going to do. And a lot of them, they feel kind of out of place. Like you're like, oh yeah, I remember seeing this in a better movie.
Where are the white ghost guys with the dreadlocks?
Those guys were cool. Those guys should have come back.
That's the one thing that is missing in this movie that at least the Matrix sequels have, which is those sequels have some cool ass fight scenes, like legitimately cool fight scenes. The second movie in particular, Matrix Reloaded, it has that awesome fight scene in that like open atrium area with the staircase, where Neo is like pulling weapons off the wall the entire time and fighting the guys. And then it immediately transitions into the highway chase. And the highway chase is fucking awesome. They're fighting those ghost guys.
Yeah.
And they're like jumping between the cars and stuff like that. This movie does not have a cool fight scene. None of the action is cool. And obviously it's probably a side effect of like Keanu's in his 60s? Is he? I think he's like literally 60. So clearly he's older and doing the stunts is probably tougher for him.
I mean, I don't know. Didn't John Wick 4 come out after this movie? And that movie's awesome.
He's not exactly like flipping around or anything like that though in the John Wick
That's
movies.
true. It's much more like concise movements. But even still, like, he had stunt doubles. I would say that they just like, it's just less memorable fight choreography. I wouldn't pin it on his age per se. I do think that, some of the fights were still cool. They just weren't memorable the way those sequences in the first 3 movies are.
Because the Matrix as an idea for a film, you can have all of this like weird sci-fi stuff in there, and then you intercut it with cool fight scenes.
Yeah. That's how you get the audience to take the pill of like, philosophical questions, is you you wrap it in really cool action and memorable sequences that they'll come out of the theaters talking about.
Yeah, and this movie just doesn't have it, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think what, like, the scene where they jump off the building at the end, I know they did that like practically, so they were using high wires off an actual tall building. So I at least thought that was cool. Maybe I was biased because I knew that a lot went into it behind the scenes, but I thought that looked cool. I thought the training sequence with Morpheus, the way they did it in this one,
Which is another callback.
which is just a callback. But yeah, I thought that was like an okay fight. Yeah, and then, but a lot of it is just like people shooting guns at each other, mostly missing, and yeah, just spraying bullets, and it's not that cool.
Like, they literally make a joke at the beginning of the movie where they're talking about developing the game, and they're like, this game's going to be about one word, bullet time.
I like that sequence a lot, where it's where Neo gets the order that he has to make the Matrix 4, and they also put together like a focus group together with the developers, and they all argue about what the Matrix is about and what makes it successful. That was like a really cool meta thing where they got to examine the legacy of those first 3 movies in kind of like a fun montage. I like that scene. It felt like it was from a different movie, but yeah, it was cool.
But yeah, this movie came out in 2021. I don't think there's any indication that they're working on a sequel for this, right?
And no, there's still a sequel in development.
It's in develop. Is it still Lana Wachowski doing it again?
No, she's gonna produce it. I think maybe Drew Goddard is the guy they've tapped for right now to direct a 5th Matrix or a Matrix spinoff.
Because like, where do they go from here? I have no idea.
I don't know.
There's nothing interesting, right?
I don't know.
The only place you can go from here is a literal, we need to take down the system for good type story.
Right.
But that's not really where this one leaves off at.
No. Here they like come back into the Matrix at the end of it to try and rebuild the world for the better and make it so that people, when they are ready, will want to leave.
But they do leave Smith as like a loose end. He kind of just disappears at the end of the movie.
Yeah. So Smith teams up with Neo essentially, or basically just saves him from the analyst for no real reason other than the fact that he wants to demonstrate that he has free will now, which I thought was cool. I actually like that part of the movie a lot.
It's the one like kind of interesting idea that they present in this movie is that more and more they're noticing people not being interested in leaving the Matrix. I guess people taking the blue pill.
Yeah. Yeah.
And saying, we like it here.
I'm playing Persona 5 now, and that's also kind of the twist ending of that game.
Oh, man, spoilers.
Yes, we're spoiling Persona 5, the vanilla version, but they've been changing hearts this whole time and entering something called the metaverse, and then they find out that a lot of people would rather be rolled over by like something that tells them what to do than they actually want to be free. And the Phantom Thieves have to deal with that and try and wake society up. And I think it's very similar to what we see here. The analyst posits that like people like being...
Yeah, people like being controlled.
Yeah, and they like... I forget what he says. Oh, desire and fear are like the 2 things that rule everyone. Secretly wanting what you don't have while fearing losing what you do have. I thought that was a good quote. Yeah, I think there were interesting ideas presented in this movie that I'm sure they could expand on if they wanted to.
Anyway, if we're going off Letterboxd for our objective rating, the Letterboxd score is a 2.7 out of 5.
Yeah, pretty middle of the road.
So a 5.4 out of 10.
Yeah.
Almost like a dead center. I think the Rotten Tomatoes is like 62% or something like that.
Yeah, that's a little bit higher, but yeah.
Well, what is your... Did you do a revised Letterboxd score, or are you keeping your old one?
I have nothing new to say, really, from my old score, which is just that I like that the cast of Sense8 was in this.
Because listen, there's nothing wrong with changing your scores in movies over time.
I agree with that.
Especially if the first time you see a movie is in a theater, or you're seeing it like opening night or something. You know, shout out to Spider-Man No Way Home. It's probably like the most overly inflated review scores ever because of the theater going experience of that.
Yeah, it was so fun. And then you watch the movie at home and you're like, I don't know if I'm even gonna finish this.
God, they're pausing for applause a lot. I'm not clapping sitting in my living room.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay, 2.7 out of 5. I guess we seem to have pretty clear sides on this. So I'm gonna toss it over to you here. Why is Matrix Resurrections underrated?
Yeah, I mean, what was the last thing I just said? Oh, yeah, I liked some of the ideas that they posited. I liked the analyst as a villain. I thought Neil Patrick Harris did a good job. I thought Jonathan Groff was really great. I think he put his own spin on Agent Smith that was really interesting. It would have been cool to see Hugo Weaving back in the role, but like getting Jonathan Groff was a really good like understudy. It's just good to see these characters back, I guess, and see the way that they've kind of evolved. Neo seems, by the end of the movie, a little more comfortable in his role as the one. People call him a legend when he gets to the real world, and he's pretty reluctant at first, but then by the end of it, him and Trinity are badasses ready to fly off and save the world anytime.
Yeah, it's kind of like Star Wars a little bit in that also where you have your main characters from the original films are older now, and then you have younger characters being like, oh my god, you're so fucking cool.
Yeah, it is interesting. You can tell this like partway wanted to be a legacy sequel because Bugs does feel like she's kind of being set up as the new protagonist. She's like the first character introduced in the movie, but then they hand it back off to the guys we already know. So I thought that was an interesting choice. But yeah, I think this is something that takes that original franchise and updates it for where at least one of the original directors is at emotionally now. I think this has a more hopeful ending than the original trilogy. The original trilogy ends with a tenuous peace pact between robots and humans, and this movie shows us that there's now at least one city where robots and humans live in harmony and will work together.
Yeah, they're growing strawberries.
Yeah, and they're growing strawberries. And we meet some really chill robots. We meet some robots, and they're like very much like, you know, pets. They're like cute and cuddly. So I thought that was cool. I just think it's cool that Lana Wachowski got to update her vision based on everything that's changed with her, and she's, you know, obviously changed a lot. She's transitioned between the first movie and now, and gone on to direct so many other things. So we do see a little bit of an evolution in the directing style, and I do find it like a worthwhile sequel to check out. Like, I think if you're going to watch the Matrix movies, then you should watch all four.
I'm going to argue that if you're going to watch the Matrix movies, watch the first three. Do not watch this one. Mm-hmm. I think this movie is just not very good. And it's clearly a movie that if it was up to the directors, they would not make this movie. They probably did not have interest in coming back to this franchise if they could have helped it. And I 100% believe the line that's in the movie that Warner Brothers would have made this film with or without the Wachowskis, with or without Keanu Reeves, Carrie-Anne Moss. They probably didn't give a fuck who came back from for this movie. They were making it with or without them. And when you look at the film off of that like premise alone, you can maybe say, yeah, this is a film that they made it better than what it would have been if it was just some abomination. If it was the Crow remake that just came out and made like less than $10 million domestically, but it's still a movie that pales in comparison to the original. The original is one of the greatest science fiction action films of all time, and this movie is just fine at best. One, it's too long. Two, it's not a very good action movie. Three, it is not accessible at all to new viewers. It is barely accessible to people who have seen the previous three films, because it's possible that you haven't seen the other films since like the early 2000s. So you're like, what the hell is even going on here?
Yeah.
Well, what is this backstory? When J. Pickett Smith shows up, you're like, wait, who is she again? Which character was she? So it's just convoluted, and I almost wish that they went in a totally different direction with it. At least you would be able to look at it through a different lens. And what does this movie look like if it wasn't Keanu Reeves and Carrie-Anne Moss, and like it wasn't a Neo story, it was some other story. It was like Bugs and her crew. If they did some sort of like Joss Whedon-esque adventure with the crew, and they're trying to extract somebody from the Matrix or something like that, or it's some sort of heist movie in the Matrix, doing something interesting like that instead of literally going the soft reboot route, where this film is basically a carbon copy of the plot of the first Matrix, just elongated and packed with a bunch of unnecessary quips and references and unnecessarily cringe dialogue and shit like that. It's unfortunate. I think it is possible to make a good Matrix movie still. Like I said at the beginning, I am somebody who's kind of like an apologist of the second and third Matrix movies. I'm not one of those people that makes the joke of, oh, Matrix is so good, I really wish they made a sequel to it. That would be cool. I think Matrix Reloaded is actually pretty solid. I think so too. Especially like it's just a straight action movie. It's a good action movie. And then the third one is, the third one's fine. Third one is, it's a little messy, but even still, the fight between Smith and Neo at the end of the third one is badass, and it's really epic. This one just doesn't hit those. It doesn't hit the highs. It doesn't have a lot of highs in general. You can count like one hand, like particular moments or characters where I was like, oh, this is kind of like interesting. Like when I see Morpheus and his like super colorful suits, I'm like, that's different.
Yeah. They've got some good design choices for the characters, and they have some interesting philosophical talks, but the action doesn't really hit the highs, like you said. And then there's also just a lot of nonsense.
I'm also gonna keep it like 100 here. Keanu is kind of phoning it in this movie. I can't really tell if he's acting all the times. There's a lot of scenes where he just goes, yeah.
I think that's kind of his style. I don't know. I
really respect him. Like he didn't shave his beard or cut his hair.
Yeah, apparently like it was too close to the filming of John Wick, so he had to keep
the same look.
But then John Wick got postponed due to COVID. So this was shot before COVID, and John Wick 4 was shot after COVID. So he actually did end up shaving all of that for the real world sequences where he's bald. So he did the entire Matrix shooting with the long hair, and then he cut it, and then they filmed all the other scenes afterwards, and then he had to grow it right back out again.
Yeah, it's tough to say because you're right. His acting in general is kind of one note. That's kind of his thing. But in this one in particular, it felt less like I was seeing Neo, the character, and it just seemed like I was watching Keanu Reeves. Like I was just watching the dude.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd agree with that. Like I found his performance to be on par with the rest of his Matrix performances. And I think he was happy to be back. I think that he always speaks very highly of the Matrix films and his time working on them and the people that he collaborated with to make them. So I'm sure he did not phone it in.
But anyway, where do you think what's like our conclusion here for overrated, underrated? 2.7 is pretty high in my purview, at least.
You know, even though this movie is kind of boring, I think it is like watchable to the extent that it's like a 2.7 type of movie. Anything I rank below a 3 has to be like bad, and I just don't think this is that. I think this is a fine movie. I think it brings back the cast of Sense8 after they got unjustly canceled.
Do you have that like Rotten Tomatoes mentality when you're rating movies, where anything under a 3 is you saying you didn't like it?
Yeah, pretty much. Like if I rate something a 2.5, it generally means I don't like it. Whereas a 3, I'm like, this is fine, and I would watch it again, like in a hotel or something.
I've been looking at my Letterboxd scores like recently because this is the first year that I've done a lot of movie logging. I think I'm at like 77 films or something like that this year, and I'm almost like intentionally trying to create like a bell curve.
Yeah, me too. I did that too.
Where I was looking the other day and I was like, I've rated the same number of movies 3 and 3.5 stars.
You got to bump up those 3s.
I got to get another 3 in there.
Now, I do mine on a bell curve, on a curve. My peak is the 3.5, I think.
Oh, okay.
Because, well, it should skew towards a more positive, unless you're seeking out bad
Ideally,
movies.
You're watching movies you like.
Yeah,
I would agree.
Exactly.
Unless it's this podcast and you're going through your schedule going, hey, we should watch some movies that people think are bad because they'll be fun to talk about.
And we finally have that with Revenge.
Do you think the conventional wisdom on do you think like people have landed on Resurrections as a good movie or a bad movie?
You know what? I think time is still going to tell. If you look at the top rated reviews, there are all these people like saying that this movie is brilliant. And then, yeah, we'll just have to see. I mean, I definitely didn't like it as much on my rewatch, so we need more people to rewatch the movie and then see how they feel.
Yeah, well, I guess when the next one comes out and people rewatch it.
Yeah, I don't know if that'll actually happen, but we'll see.
Yeah. Anyway, that's going to be it for Over Under Matrix Resurrections. Jason, thanks for joining us on the pod again today. It's a long drive down here.
Yeah, thanks, Dylan. I like the place.
Yeah, for anybody watching us on YouTube or Spotify video, got our posters up. they're hanging in there. We tried to flatten them out, but they're still curling a little bit.
That's fine.
We'll make it work.
Yeah.
Anyway, make sure you check us out on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Pods, Patreon, all that good stuff. Hit us up on Discord. Talk about movies. Check out the Letterboxd stuff that we're talking about in every episode here. Letterboxd, if you're listening, throw us a bone.
Yeah, we do talk about you a lot. We use you as like a baseline for a lot of our discussion.
Anyway, for myself, for Jason, that's going to be it for this episode of the Over Under Movies podcast. We will see you with the movies. Later.
Bye.